Okay, tonight is Jacob chapter 5. Now, chapter 5 of Jacob is what's known as the parable, the Tame and wild olive tree. Okay, and if you read the introduction there, right, it says he likens it to the olive tree to Israel and the Gentiles, the church, the apostasy, the restoration, and latter-day events. See, so all that's covered in this chapter, right? Even though anybody reading it just thinks it's about trees and ground, right? But yet it's prophetic about all these things that would happen. So we're going to, again, take it step by step and try to point out what each thing means, and as we go through it, and then hopefully have an understanding of what the parable is about. So it's really kind of probably the key parable in the Book of Mormon.
Behold, my brethren, do ye not remember to have read the words of the prophet Zenos, which he spake unto the house of Israel, saying, Hearken, O ye house of Israel, and hear the words of me, a prophet of the Lord. For behold, thus saith the Lord, I will liken thee, O house of Israel, like unto a tame olive tree, which a man took and nourished in his vineyard, and it grew and waxed old, and began to decay.
First of all, it refers to the prophet Zenos. So who is Zenos then? Right, he's still a prophet. Okay, he's just a prophet, and who wrote a book, probably a book of Zenos, but it wasn't selected to be in the Bible. He's somebody who wrote prophecies, but they didn't get into the Bible. So then where did the people here pick up the book of Zenos? The book of Zenos is one of the ones on the brass plates, all right? So actually, I mean, it's one that didn't make the cut for the Bible, right? Because the Bible prophets were all here, but again, it's not to say the brass plates were word for word what's in the Old Testament. It was a collection of writings of prophets. And so whenever people got together to put together the King James Bible, right, the Bible, they picked certain prophecies or prophets' writings that were going to comprise the Bible. And so we're assuming that the book of Zenos would have been one that wouldn't have been selected. Now, as he starts out in verse 3, right, it says he's going to, in this parable, he's going to liken the house of Israel to a tame olive tree. Right, and I want us to remember that they are the tame olive tree, because later on it's going to be a wild olive tree, and so if Israel is the tame olive tree, then somebody else has to be the wild olive tree. Right? So the house of Israel is likened to a tame olive tree, which a man took and nourished in his vineyard, and it grew and waxed old and began to decay. Israel, as we've read many of the words of Isaiah and what we've studied and so forth, that Israel had a lot of problems in the early going. Right, this is that they were not doing what they're supposed to be doing. Certainly in the BC years, they were at war with each other and not following the teachings of God. And then ultimately, as we've just read in the last chapter, when it came to the time of Christ, that they didn't really accept Christ. Or they didn't accept Christ. Right? The Jews in particular, but really any of Israel, were not accepting of Christ. So that's why it's saying now that it was beginning to wax old and decay, because they were not accepting what God was sending them. So they would not be bearing fruit, as you said, and that they would start to decay instead. Right? They really were headed, for a spiritual death because they were not accepting Christ. Right? So the tame olive tree beginning to decay in verse 3 is that, right? The time of Christ would have been beginning to decay because they were not accepting Christ.
And it came to pass that the master of the vineyard went forth, and he saw that his olive tree began to decay. And he said, I will prune it, and dig about it, and nourish it, that perhaps it may shoot forth young and tender branches, and it perish not. And it came to pass that he pruned it, and digged about it, and nourished it according to his word. And it came to pass that after many days it began to put forth somewhat a little young and tender branches, but behold, the main top thereof began to perish.
The master of the vineyard, okay, which of course would be compared to God, all right, is looking at the trees here, and his olive trees is beginning to decay. So he says, you know what, I'm going to do something to try to help it out here. All right, he says I'm going to prune it and dig about it and nourish it, and I'm going to try to make it work here. I'm going to try to make it grow better. All right, so it says in 5, he did that, he pruned, he digged, nourished it, and so forth. And then in 6, he went and looked and said, hey, look, it's starting to grow a little bit here. We're getting some tender young branches, and it's starting to do better. Even though the main part of the top is still not looking too good, but at least there's some little branches popping up here. being we said that they were decaying at the time of Christ, right? That I think that Christ coming and then the apostles setting up the original church was the way that God was trying to reach down for Israel at this point, right? That he was trying to reach out to them by sending Christ, and the apostles were teaching the word. And so some believed. The day of Pentecost, they had 3,000 baptized. They set up the early church, right? And so that the early church was doing well, and they had some who were believing, and so they had the apostles in their midst, and they were understanding of Christ, so they were doing well at that point. So it says in the early days that they were seeing some good, positive growth among Israel because the initial acceptance was there. It says, but the main top, which means those who would have been the leaders, right, obviously were not accepting Christ, as we know, that they were still wanted to run the synagogues and be the ones in charge, and so they were not going to accept Christ, but yet there was a definite movement, or the way that was going to be accepting of Christ. So at the beginning, in the early days of the church, there was an acceptance, and so it was, you could kind of picture it almost like little branches or sprouts starting to sprout up, and as if they were going to grow and be good. Right, and bear some fruit.
And it came to pass that the master of the vineyard saw it, and he said unto his servant, It grieveth me that I should lose this tree. Wherefore go and pluck the branches from a wild olive tree, and bring them hither unto me, and we will pluck off those main branches which are beginning to wither away, and we will cast them into the fire, that they may be burned. And behold, saith the Lord of the vineyard, I take away many of these young and tender branches, and I will graft them whithersoever I will, and it mattereth not that if it so be that the root of this tree will perish, I may preserve the fruit thereof unto myself. Wherefore I will take these young and tender branches, and I will graft them whithersoever I will. Take thou the branches of the wild olive tree, and graft them in the stead thereof, and these which I have plucked off I will cast into the fire and burn them, that they may not cumber the ground of my vineyard.
In verse 7 it says that, as the master saw it, he says, I don't want to lose the whole tree, or I don't want to lose the house of Israel. I want Israel to be the chosen people, as they're supposed to have been all along. All right, so now we need some help here. So we're gonna go pluck some branches from a wild olive tree and graft them into the tame tree. All right, so we're gonna get some other branches to try to get the tree to perk up and be the kind of tree that I want it to be. So the tame tree was Israel, so the wild tree was the Gentiles. So now he says he's going to take some of those wild Gentile branches and graft them into the tame olive tree of Israel. Right? So basically bringing everybody together into one tree, or one family, if you will, the family of God. And as you know the history, as we had read in the Acts of the Apostles, that the Apostle Paul in particular became the apostle to the Gentiles, and he went around preaching the gospel to the Gentiles and bringing the gospel beyond Israel. Right? That Peter did a little bit of it with Cornelius, bringing the Gentiles into the family of God also. So if we say sometimes if Israel had fully accepted Christ, perhaps the Gentiles never would have been preached to. Who knows? I mean, we like to believe the gospel for everybody, but Israel was the first to receive it, and when they refused it or rejected, at least those at the top of the tree, then it was put out to the Gentiles and to accept and be part of it. And so that's the grafting in of the wild branches. Yes. It says that it's taking some of the young and tender branches and moving them around. Right? It's going to put them here and there. At the end of verse 8, it says, I'll graft them whithersoever I will. So I'll put them here, there, and everywhere. When Israel scattered, so it says now that these tame branches are kind of put in all different places, all right? So that was the scattering of Israel. So these are some of the things that happened in history that correspond to what we're reading here in the parable.
And it came to pass that the servant of the Lord of the vineyard did according to the word of the Lord of the vineyard, and grafted in the branches of the wild olive tree. And the Lord of the vineyard caused that it should be digged about, and pruned, and nourished, saying unto his servant, It grieveth me that I should lose this tree. Wherefore, that perhaps I might preserve the roots thereof, that they perish not, that I might preserve them unto myself, I have done this thing. Wherefore, go thy way, watch the tree, and nourish it according to my words.
The Lord of the vineyard here gives the command to then graft in those wild branches and bring it together. And now, as he's saying there, he says, now we have one tree though, right? It's one tree that's got a mixture of tame and wild branches, but we're going to treat it as one tree. We're going to nourish it and water it and preserve the roots and so forth, because this is now one tree. It's not well, we're going to treat this part of the tree this way, and this part of the tree that way, right? It's one tree that we're going to take care of. It's because it's one family now that's been grafted together. The Lord of the Vineyard caused that this would happen, and he gave the command for people to take care of it. Now, when it refers to the servant of the Lord of the Vineyard, right, I guess in 10, I'll just say the church, and then with the priesthood being the leaders of the church. Yeah, I think that's who that it was turning to here, to go ahead and nourish the tree and take care of it and treat it all as one tree, one body, right? The church and the leadership thereof. Right? So that would be the servant of the Lord. So anytime he gives a command to the servant to do something, that would be who he would be telling to do that.
And these will I place in the nethermost part of my vineyard, whithersoever I will, it mattereth not unto thee, and I do it that I may preserve unto myself the natural branches of the tree, and also that I may lay up fruit thereof against the season unto myself, for it grieveth me that I should lose this tree and the fruit thereof. And it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard went his way, and hid the natural branches of the tame olive tree in the nethermost parts of the vineyard, some in one and some in another, according to his will and pleasure.
13, right, he's saying, I'm going to place these branches in the nethermost parts of the vineyard. Okay, if you don't know what nethermost means, it means kind of all over and as far out as you can go. And also notice it refers to it as a vineyard, right? And so, sometimes in the scripture, the tree and vine are interchangeable, and so the vineyard would be the place where the trees grow. Now, as the master of the vineyard is looking about and saying, I'm going to move this one, these branches are kind of way over there, and these ones way down there, right? Now, the vineyard to us is not a piece of property, it's the whole world, right? So as God is the master of the whole world, so therefore the whole world is the vineyard to him. And so when he says, I'm going to put this in the nethermost parts of the vineyard, it could be anywhere in the world. And so he's putting some here and some there. And as was said, and now in a little bit further in 13, as he's addressing the servant, who we're saying is the church/priesthood, it says, it mattereth not unto thee where I put it. All right, so I'm going to put it where I want to put it, and so I'm not necessarily going to reveal it to you, and it shouldn't really matter to you right now, because at some point they're going to come back, but right now we want them just scattered around. And we're doing that for a reason, to preserve those natural branches or those tribes of Israel, right? That, again, perhaps if they all stayed together, something else may have happened, right? Some would have been wiped out. So by putting one here, one here, one here, right? So he's preserving those till the day when he's going to bring them back together. So again, we don't know where those tribes particularly are, and again, perhaps there's different classes of people or something we don't know, but we know that there wasn't scattering of Israel and that they're now hidden throughout the world, or hidden, so to speak, and that we don't know who they are. Right? So that's where the tribes have gone, and they're there until such a time as they'll be brought back together. So that's there to preserve each one in particular. And it's the metaphor that's coming out here is preserving the fruit of the natural branches till such a time as he's ready to pull them back together. There's a phrase there in 13 towards the end. It says, for he grieveth me that I should lose this tree and the fruit thereof. That phrase is used probably about 15 times in this chapter, right? And it says that the Lord, it says, it grieveth me that I should lose this tree. And so that's, that tells you something, okay? That, God is trying his best to save Israel, right? Because, that was his chosen people right from the start. So he says, he doesn't want to lose this tree. So he'll go to extraordinary measures to preserve the tree until such a time as it can be brought back together to preserve the house of Israel. Right?
And it came to pass that a long time passed away, and the Lord of the vineyard said unto his servant, Come, let us go down into the vineyard, that we may labor in the vineyard. And it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard, and also the servant, went down into the vineyard to labor. And it came to pass that the servant said unto his master, Behold, look here, behold the tree. And it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard looked, and beheld the tree, in the which the wild olive branches had been grafted, and it had sprung forth, and begun to bear fruit. And it beheld that it was good, and the fruit thereof was like unto the natural fruit. And he said unto the servant, Behold, the branches of the wild tree have taken hold of the moisture of the root thereof, that the root thereof hath brought forth much strength, and because of the much strength of the root thereof, the wild branches have brought forth tame fruit. Now, if we had not grafted in these branches, the tree thereof would have perished. And now, behold, I shall lay up much fruit, which the tree thereof hath brought forth, and the fruit thereof I shall lay up against the season unto mine own self.
If you wanted to summarize what these 3 or 4 verses are saying, we're doing good, okay? That the the wild branches are grafted in, so the Gentiles are brought on board, and they're doing well, right, at the start. And again, certainly as you read, again, through Acts of the Apostles, you see the Paul in particular traveling about from city to city and country to country, and suddenly there's a church in Rome, there's churches in Greece, there's churches all over the place, right, that he's able to get started, and a lot of it was among the Gentile people. So the Gentiles were taking hold, and he says now, as you read here, it says the fruit was like the fruit from the original tree. So in other words, they were taking hold of the church and the gospel of Christ, and it was just like it would have been, or had God intended it to be with Israel. So it was working, they were doing well with it.
And it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard said unto the servant, Come, let us go to the nethermost part of the vineyard, and behold, if the natural branches of the tree have not brought forth much fruit also, that I may lay up of the fruit thereof against the season unto mine own self. And it came to pass that they went forth, whither the master had hid the natural branches of the tree, and he said unto the servant, Behold these. And he beheld the first, that it had brought forth much fruit, and he beheld also that it was good. And he said unto the servant, Take of the fruit thereof, and lay it up against the season, that I may preserve it unto mine own self. For behold, said he, this long time have I nourished it, and it hath brought forth much fruit. And it came to pass that the servant said unto his master, How comest thou hither to plant this tree, or this branch of the tree? For behold, it was the poorest spot in all the land of the vineyard. And the Lord of the vineyard said unto him, Counsel me not. I knew that it was a poor spot of ground. Wherefore I said unto thee, I have nourished it this long time, and thou beholdest that it hath brought forth much fruit.
You're going on a little field trip here, right? It says that the Lord of the vineyard is taking the servant. He says, let's go to those nethermost parts of the vineyard and visit one of the spots where I planted some of those natural branches, right? And let's see how they're doing. They were doing good, okay? It says it had fruit, and it was good fruit, and so it was doing well. So far the plan's working, all right? They grafted in the wild branches into the natural tree, and that's doing well. And we kind of transplanted these branches over there, and they're doing pretty well, all right? And now where were these branches planted? I mean, it would correspond to where? Not everything in the story has to be stuff that we know about yet. And so basically it's saying that somewhere, one of those tribes that was transplanted, and it corresponds to, says, a poor spot of ground, but yet it was doing well. It was doing well, at least spiritually, that they were producing the spiritual fruit that the Lord was looking for. So it says that this was a good spot, wherever that was. I mean, good in terms of how it was doing, but notice it says, the servant says, hey, why'd you pick this spot to plant this? Look, it's the poorest spot in all the vineyard. And so the Lord of the vineyard says, what? I'll tell you what to do, right? Right? Counsel me not, all right? I knew it was a poor spot of ground, but do you think I couldn't see what I was doing here? All right? I know what I'm doing. I saw it was a poor spot of ground, but this is where I wanted to put it. And look, we've nourished it, and it's bringing forth much fruit. Right? So basically judge it by the results.
And it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard said unto his servant, Look hither, behold, I have planted another branch of the tree also, and thou knowest that this spot of ground was poorer than the first. But behold the tree, I have nourished it this long time, and it hath brought forth much fruit. Therefore gather it, and lay it up against the season, that I may preserve it unto mine own self. And it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard said again unto his servant, Look hither, and behold another branch also which I have planted. Behold, that I have nourished it also, and it hath brought forth fruit. And he said to the servant, Look hither, and behold the last. Behold, this have I planted in a good spot of ground, and I have nourished it this long time, and only a part of the tree hath brought forth tame fruit, and the other part of the tree hath brought forth wild fruit. Behold, I have nourished this tree like unto the others.
This is another one that's bringing forth much fruit. 21, when it said that the first one was in the poorest spot in all the land of the vineyard, yet now in 23 it says, this one was even in a worse spot than the other one. All right, so apparently the other one wasn't in the worst spot. It was the second worst spot. And so he's saying that this one is also in a poor spot, all right, but it's doing well. In 24, it's yet even another one, all right, so this would be the third one that's been visited, and that one's doing okay. And then finally in 25, it says it comes around to the one that's in the good spot of ground. It would be the land of the Americas, all right, the good spot of ground, all right. So this would be one of the tribes, and that tribe would be the tribe of Joseph, right? Because that's who's on the land of the Americas, all right? So and now when you look at that, it says the results aren't quite the same as the other one. If you look at what it said, and it says that it was kind of half and half. It says that a part of the tree had tame fruit, the other part of the tree had wild fruit. All right, it says, behold, I nourished this tree like the other ones, but yet we're getting a little bit different results. We got half and half here. The Nephites and the Lamanites, right? You had some that were doing what they expected to do, and some not. So it was a mixed result, all right? It had some good, some not so good. So it was some wild and some tame. So it was mixed results in the land of the Americas. So as you see, as he's going through, we had now 4 different ones visited, and it's almost like a report card of how the different ones were doing. And who knows? I mean, whenever this would happen, perhaps all of them would have been visited. But for the sake of the parable, you get the idea that he was going from one to the other, and the plan as a whole was working as of this point, because the original tree was doing well, and then these other transplanted branches were doing well. But the one in the good spot of ground was doing sort of okay, half and half.
And it came to pass, the Lord of the vineyard said unto the servant, Pluck off the branches that have not brought forth good fruit, and cast them into the fire. But behold, the servant said unto him, Let us prune it, and dig about it, and nourish it a little longer, that perhaps it may bring forth good fruit unto thee, that thou canst lay it up against the season. And it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard and the servant of the Lord of the vineyard did nourish all the fruit of the vineyard.
This is the follow-up to reviewing what was happening among Joseph, right? As it says that the Lord of the vineyard says, let's get those ones with the not so good fruit and get rid of those, right? Let's pluck those and cast them into the fire. So, but now the servant in the story, again, be it the church or whoever, is actually, if you will, pleading with the Lord. So maybe that would be through prayer or whatever, and saying, let's allow some more time. Let's give some more time. We'll do the best we can to turn things around and have things going in the right direction. I mean, at times, today we may be faced with a similar thing, even though you don't hear it spelled out in these kind of words. But I mean, we often pray for people who are in need. We pray for people who are not where they need to be, that the Lord would have patience with them or call them. We pray for our world, our town, whatever, that we would pray that God would be there for them. God is having patience. So again, perhaps it's people's prayers that are keeping it going. I mean, Sodom and Gomorrah got into where really basically nobody looking to God. So maybe to the extent that some people look to God, so it's extending that time out and allowing God to be patient and someone saying, give more time, maybe it'll get better.
And it came to pass that a long time had passed away, and the Lord of the vineyard said unto his servant, Come, let us go down into the vineyard, that we may labor again in the vineyard. For behold, the time draweth near, and the end soon cometh, wherefore I must lay up fruit against the season unto mine own self. And it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard and the servant went down into the vineyard, and they came to the tree whose natural branches had been broken off, and the wild branches had been grafted in, and behold, all sorts of fruit did cumber the tree. And it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard did taste of the fruit, every sort according to its number. And the Lord of the vineyard said, Behold, this long time have we nourished this tree, and I have laid up unto myself against the season much fruit. But behold, this time it hath brought forth much fruit, and there is none of it which is good. And behold, there are all kinds of bad fruit, and it profiteth me nothing, notwithstanding all our labor, and now it grieveth me that I should lose this tree.
Now it says that a long time passes away, right? Whatever a long time it might be. And it says now they're going to go around and check out the trees again, right? But now the results, as you see, are different, right? As they go around, it says now there's lots of fruit, but none of it's any good. Okay, so something's happened. Something's happened to the trees, wherever they've been planted. That something's happened, and what does it say? It just says much fruit and none of it, which is good, right? So what happened? What happened to all the places that were doing well at the beginning in the early church? They started making changes. Okay, they changed the things that were originally set up by Christ, by the apostles, and now suddenly, as God looks at it now, He says, "Hey, what happened? It was all the way I wanted it, and now it's changed around. Now things have been changed, and now I'm not happy with it, because it's not the kind of fruit that I'm looking for." All right, so it says that some period of time passed, and then this is what he found.
And the Lord of the vineyard said unto the servant, What shall we do unto the tree, that I may preserve again good fruit thereof unto mine own self? And the servant said unto his master, Behold, because thou didst graft in the branches of the wild olive tree, they have nourished the roots, that they are alive, and they have not perished. Wherefore thou beholdest that they are yet good.
The Lord of the vineyard and the servant was having like a conversation here, right? Which I wouldn't expect God to come to us for suggestions or counsel, but I guess it's just a way of bringing out what God is intending here, right? And so the servant said, well, you grafted in these branches, and says they haven't perished, all right, but it says, wherefore thou beholdest that they are yet good. So the roots are still okay, all right? It's just the branches are now bearing fruit that's not good. So the roots of it are still okay. So Christ is the base, right? He's the foundation, right, that everything's built on. So the foundation is good, right? It's just that now what's happening up above it is not doing so good, right? So that's why he says we're not going to lose the whole tree because we have a good foundation, but yet now we're concerned because the fruit that's coming is not good.
And it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard said unto his servant, the tree profiteth me nothing, and the roots thereof profit me nothing, so long as it shall bring forth evil fruit. Nevertheless, I know that the roots are good, and for mine own purpose I have preserved them, and because of their much strength they have hitherto brought forth from the wild branches good fruit. But behold, the wild branches have grown, and have overrun the roots thereof, and because that the wild branches have overcome the roots thereof, it hath brought forth much evil fruit. And because that it hath brought forth so much evil fruit, thou beholdest that it beginneth to perish, and it will soon become ripened, that it may be cast into the fire, except we should do something for it to preserve it.
I was looking at this tree and saying, well, yeah, it's got good roots, but you know what? I mean, unless I'm seeing good fruit, it says it profiteth me nothing, right? Now, what kind of profit are we talking about here? What kind of profit is the Lord of the vineyard looking for from the tree? It's souls, right? It's souls that would come to Christ, all right? That's the kind of profit that God's looking for, right? I mean, that's why Christ came. That's why there's a church. That's why there's teachings that people might give their soul, give their life to Christ, and soul would come to Christ and would be saved in His kingdom, right? So it's saying if it's not operating right, I'm not going to get what I'm looking for, because if the gospel's not being taught and not being preached, then how can people come to Christ if they're not being told about Christ, right? Or told about Him in the right way? So it says I need this tree to operate right, or else it profits me nothing. It doesn't do anything for me if it's not being done right, right? So we consider that for ourselves, that we want to do the best that we can to preach the gospel and share the gospel as it's recorded in the Word of God, right? Because we want people to be able to come to Christ. If we're teaching the wrong things, then they're not going to be able to come to Him. So we want to teach the right way and represent Him the right way. In 36, it says that because of their much strength that hitherto brought forth from the wild branches good fruit. There's always good people. Okay, there's always good people. There's always people wanting to do the right thing, right? So that even if things in general are not going well, there's always good people. Right? So over the course of history, even over the period of time that we say that there was an apostasy and so forth, there were still good people there who did some good things. And so people through their own strength and just because they want to do what's right, will do some good things in the name of God. So I guess all I'm saying is that there was over the course of history there were Gentiles who did good things because they were just good people. But in general, the tree was not operating as God had intended. And then finally, when you get to 37, it's saying, the wild branches have now overrun the roots. And so, as would happen over time, if the proper teaching is not being done, then people are not moving in the right direction. And then they're learning from each other or learning from the wrong sources. And we see a lot of that today. And it says that there was a point where the wild branches overran the whole tree. Now, when it gets to that point, what word do we typically assign to that period where it was like when the wild branches would have overrun the whole tree? Apostasy, right? This is a period of time we usually say that, right? That they reached a time where God looked at what was left of the original church that was set up and said, hey, I hardly recognize this anymore, right? Because it had been changed so much from the way it was originally set up by Christ, right? So then we believe it was a period of apostasy where it was then really separated from what God wanted it to be.
And it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard said unto his servant, let us go down into the nethermost parts of the vineyard, and behold, if the natural branches have also brought forth evil fruit. And it came to pass that they went down into the nethermost parts of the vineyard, and it came to pass that they beheld that the fruit of the natural branches had become corrupt also, yea, the first and the second, and also the last, and they had all become corrupt. And the wild fruit of the last had overcome that part of the tree which brought forth good fruit, even that the branch had withered away and died.
Up until now, they've just been looking at the primary tree, the original tree, if you will. It says now he goes around and checks out all the other places where it was scattered, And lo and behold, all right, it's not good anywhere now. Right? It says that it goes down and says the fruit that we place all around us has been corrupt also, right? So it's corrupt everywhere now, so it's not doing well anywhere. And so at that particular point in time, it says that now he's obviously going to be concerned because the main tree is not doing well, and all the transplanted ones are not doing well, so all the scattered tribes of Israel are also not where they should be as far as God is concerned.
And it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard wept, and said unto the servant, What could I have done more for my vineyard? Behold, I knew that all the fruit of the vineyard, save it were these, had become corrupted. And now these which have once brought forth good fruit have also become corrupted. And now all the trees of my vineyard are good for nothing, save it be to be hewn down and cast into the fire. And behold, this last, whose branch hath withered away, I did plant in a good spot of ground, yea, even that which was choice unto me above all other parts of the land of my vineyard.
This part starts out with, it says, the Lord of the vineyard wept and said, what more could I have done for the vineyard? All right, and you know, there's parts of the Bible where you get similar, you know, it says that, like when the words, you know, oh Jerusalem, I would have gathered you as a hen gathers the chicks, but you would not, right? And so, you know, I'm sure the Lord laments at times when he sees people turn away from him. And so this is the Lord of the vineyard in the parable, as he wept and said, really, what more can I have done? I sent my son to die for them, right? I made a plan of salvation, and yet the people were turning away, right? So what more could I have done to show them that I loved them and wanted them to be, in this case, part of my family, right? Or in the case of the tree, to have, you know, taken care of the tree properly so the tree could have produced good fruit. What more could I have done? All right, and so now I'm looking around, and everywhere I look, it's corrupt. You know, the main one, all the transplanted ones scattered around. Everywhere I look, I see corrupt fruit. Right, and now I'm afraid I'm going to lose the whole thing here. These ones that I see are good for nothing but to be burned up. Right, so even the one in the good spot of ground, right, which we already said earlier that the good spot of ground would have been the land of America.
And thou beheldest that I also cut down that which cumbered this spot of ground, that I might plant this tree in the stead thereof. And thou beheldest that a part thereof brought forth good fruit, and a part thereof brought forth wild fruit. And because I plucked not the branches thereof, and cast them into the fire, behold, they have overcome the good branch that it hath withered away. And now behold, notwithstanding all the care which we have taken of my vineyard, the trees thereof have become corrupted, that they bring forth no good fruit, and that these I had hoped to preserve, to have laid up fruit thereof against the season, unto mine own self. But behold, they have become like unto the wild olive tree, and they are of no worth but to be hewn down and cast into the fire, and it grieveth me that I should lose them.
You know, as we read in the story of the Book of Mormon, which talks about what's happening in the land of the Americas, that it split, where there was part good and part not good, and the Nephites and the Lamanites at the beginning, and eventually some of them interchanged. But now it's saying that over time, it's turning over to where it's all bad, right? And so, and that's what he's kind of lamenting here in 44 to 46. He's looking at the land of the America, or the good spot of ground, and saying, you know, it's all turned over now, right? I think it said that all the wild ones have overcome the good ones, and so now we find that it's all turned to not good fruit. Right, so that can tell you about where this would be in time, right? Because it would be probably around the end of the time period covered by the Book of Mormon, which would be around the year 400 AD, right? Was where the Book of Mormon ends. So you can assume that that's about where this was, because at the end of the Book of Mormon, not that this is a spoiler or anything, right? But at the end of the book, it turns out that, you know, just all the evil reigns, and it gets down to even just one man is left with carrying the records, and so he buries the records at the end of the book, and so he's the last surviving servant of God. Okay, so it did overcome the evil, overcame the good in the Americas at that time. Right, so that's what the Lord of the vineyard is looking at this time. He's looking at that, saying, "This is what I got now." Right, I started out with good fruit, and it was half and half later, and now the bad has overcome the good. Okay.
But what could I have done more in my vineyard? Have I slackened mine hand that I have not nourished it? Nay, I have nourished it, and I have digged about it, and I have pruned it, and I have dunged it, and I have stretched forth mine hand almost all the day long, and the end draweth nigh. And it grieveth me that I should hew down all the trees of my vineyard, and cast them into the fire, that they should be burned. Who is it that has corrupted my vineyard? And it came to pass that the servant said unto his master, Is it not the loftiness of thy vineyard? Have not the branches thereof overcome the roots which are good? And because the branches have overcome the roots thereof, Behold, they grew faster than the strength of the roots, taking strength unto themselves. Behold, I say, is not this the cause that the trees of thy vineyard have become corrupted?
In 47, it's asking a certain question. Looking at it, saying, what's happened? Is there anything else that I could have done? It's bad results here. Okay, last few verses we talked about when there was good fruit, and if you remember, the servant was saying, "Hey, you planted these trees in like the worst spot of ground." He says, "Hey, but look at the results, all right? I got good fruit, so who cares what kind of ground I put it in because it was good fruit, all right? Well, here now the results have turned not so good. So now he's saying, what else could I have done?" And from a tree perspective, right? He's saying, I digged it, I pruned it, I dunged it, I did all those things that make trees healthy, and yet it's not helped. Now, what would you liken that to from a spiritual perspective? Remember when we read the story, he sent Jesus, all right? As was said, there were prophets that were sent, there were angels that were sent and that were seen, all right? So there was miracles, there was answered prayers, it was all the things that God does to nurture his people, right? To draw his people closer to him. Some of the same kind of things that we see today, all right? So that was all done. And yet, it still didn't turn out good. So what more could I have done? What more could I have done? And that's a fair question, right? Certainly he gave the best that he had for these people, and yet they were not accepting of it. All right, well, now in 48, it starts to talk a little bit about what's happened here. All right, and when it says that the branches have overcome the roots which are good, we talked about that the roots actually, we felt that the roots represented Christ, all right? So we don't say that people can overcome Christ, right? But what they can do is they can overcome the feelings of what they should be doing for Christ, right? The examples that were set and so forth. That's the foundation, right? The church and everything is built on the foundation of Christ, right? So yeah, you never overcome Christ, but certainly you can overcome those feelings of what you should do. When we have the Holy Ghost within us, the Holy Ghost prompts us of the things that we should do or not to do, but yet we can override that at any time because we have our human will, our human strength. So we don't have to listen to the promptings of the Lord if we don't want to, right? But what happens then is you go down the wrong path when you override that, right? And so I think that's what it's saying here, is that the people, says they took strength unto themselves, right, as it says in 48. So they basically relied on their own thoughts, their own ideas, their own strength, saying in a way, we don't need God, we can do it ourselves, right? I'll take care of myself, I'll do for myself, right? These are the kind of things that I think that they were doing, and so the result is this, and now the fruit is far from what God would have wanted it to be.
And it came to pass, the Lord of the vineyard said unto the servant, Let us go to and hew down the trees of the vineyard, and cast them into the fire, that they shall not cumber the ground of my vineyard, for I have done all. What could I have done more for my vineyard? But behold, the servant said unto the Lord of the vineyard, Spare it a little longer. And the Lord said, Yea, I will spare it a little longer, for it grieveth me that I should lose the trees of my vineyard.
The reaction of the Lord of the vineyard at this point, as he's looking at these trees with the lousy fruit, all right, let's burn them up. Let's burn them up, all right? Scripture says if a tree or a branch that doesn't bear good fruit is good for nothing but be cast in the fire, right? So that's what he wants to do here. He says, hey, let's just burn them up. They're not bringing forth any good fruit. He says, but yet now the servant in the story prevails upon him to spare it a little bit longer, give it more time. It was the ministry or the church, right? Was the servant. So basically the prayers of those who would have been righteous would have prevailed upon God to spare things a little bit longer. Okay, so again, not that any of us are telling God what to do or anything, all right? But yet we can certainly pray and ask for things, and since we can move the arm of God with our prayers. So it says here that the servant said to the Lord of the vineyard, spare it a little bit longer. It says in the Lord in the story, said, yes, I'll spare it a little longer because I don't want to lose the trees. Right? So I mean, again, it's easier to ask God for things when it's consistent with what God wants to do in the first place. Right? That's just a good lesson in general for praying. Right? If you pray for something that God wants to give you, you're pretty likely to get it. Right? As opposed to praying for something that doesn't want to give you, which then you really don't want to get it.
Wherefore let us take of the branches of these which I have planted in the nethermost parts of my vineyard, and let us graft them into the tree from whence they came, and let us pluck from the tree those branches whose fruit is most bitter, and graft in the natural branches of the tree in the stead thereof. And this will I do, that the tree may not perish, that perhaps I may preserve unto myself the roots thereof for mine own purpose. And behold, the roots of the natural branches of the tree, which I planted whithersoever I would, are yet alive. Wherefore, that I may preserve them also for mine own purpose, I will take of the branches of this tree, and I will graft them in unto them, Yea, I will graft in unto them the branches of their mother tree, that I may preserve the roots also unto mine own self, that when they shall be sufficiently strong, perhaps they may bring forth good fruit unto me, and I may yet have glory in the fruit of my vineyard.
In 52 to 54, right now, he's talking about a plan. And the plan looks to me like we're gonna mix things up again. Okay, we're gonna shake things up. We're gonna take branches from the trees that have been scattered. We're gonna put them into the main tree where they started out. We're gonna take some of the ones from the main tree. We're gonna put them out in those trees that were spread throughout the world. Right, so basically gonna shake things up. But mostly it's gonna try to bring branches together and back into the main tree. The gathering in the house of Israel, right, would be really what that would be talking about, right? That it's gonna take from all the different tribes or trees that have been scattered throughout the world, and it's going to bring them back together into the main tree, right? So it would be the gathering of Israel. However, I want to point out that at this point, he's talking about it, right? It doesn't say that they did it here, right? Because otherwise it's out of order. Okay, it didn't happen yet, so it's still a future event. So basically, it's saying that that's the plan, right? So we're going to pull everybody together, right? And then this way, it can strengthen the tree, and then it can grow and bring forth the kind of fruit that I'm looking for. Right, so he's talking about a gathering of Israel. So it almost sounded like, in the story, this is where the plan took shape. So, okay, we scattered Israel all over the place, and now they're not doing so well. So let's start to work toward a time when we can bring them all back together, and then they can be strong together. Right, so that's the plan.
And it came to pass that they took from the natural tree which had become wild, and grafted in unto the natural trees which also had become wild. And they also took of the natural trees which had become wild, and grafted into their mother tree. And the Lord of the vineyard said unto the servant, Pluck not the wild branches from the trees, save it be those which are most bitter, and in them ye shall graft according to that which I have said. And we will nourish again the trees of the vineyard, and we will trim up the branches thereof, and we will pluck from the trees those branches which are ripened, that must perish, and cast them into the fire.
This is, again, talking in more specifics about how this is going to be brought about, all right? As it came to pass, they took from the natural tree, which had become wild, and grafted in unto the natural trees, which also become wild, right? And they also took of the natural trees, which become wild, and grafted into another tree, right? So it says now they're starting to mix these, all right? And now here's where I believe that one instance of where this has happened, right, is it in a way that now Joseph as a tribe was in essence hidden at one time, okay? That people didn't know where Joseph was. All right, but Joseph became visible. How? The Book of Mormon, okay? The Book of Mormon, okay? So I think here in 55 to 58, all right, it's talking about a time when now he's going to start to make these tribes visible, but the coming forth of the Book of Mormon made Joseph visible, right? So now suddenly Joseph is mixed into the whole mix here as part of the house of Israel, right? And I think that as you look at these, that something similar will be done to identify the other tribes, just those haven't happened yet. So 55 to 58, part of it has come to pass because the Book of Mormon made Joseph visible, all right? And so really, I mean, from our perspective, Joseph is now part of Israel again, all right? But because we know who those people are, all right? If we knew who all the other tribes were, we'd help them all be part of Israel, right? We go around telling Joseph that they're part of Israel today. And again, when I talk about Joseph, I talk about the natives of the Americas, all right? Just in case I didn't mention that already, right? That the seed of Joseph is your Native Americans, your American Indians, your Indians from Central America, from South America, okay? Your Mayans and Aztecs and all those, all right? They're all natives of the Americas. Your Carib Indians and so forth, okay? So when we preach to all those people as to who they are, we're informing them that they're part of Israel, right? We're helping to now take some of those branches that were scattered in this part of the world and get them back into the original tree, right? Because we're now trying to bring them back in to know that they're part of Israel. Okay, so these verses talk about that. It's talking about a way of now starting to bring them back into the tree. Now it's a slow process. It won't be completed until the full gathering of Israel takes place, but this is what we're doing. We're starting out that, and the Book of Mormon made that possible by identifying who Joseph was.
And this I do, that perhaps the roots thereof may take strength because of their goodness, and because of the change of the branches, that the good may overcome the evil. And because that I have preserved the natural branches and the roots thereof, and that I have grafted in the natural branches again into their mother tree, and have preserved the roots of their mother tree, that perhaps the trees of my vineyard may bring forth again good fruit, and that I may have joy again in the fruit of my vineyard, and perhaps that I may rejoice exceedingly that I have preserved the roots and the branches of the first fruit. Wherefore go to and call servants, that we may labor diligently with our might in the vineyard, that we may prepare the way, that I may bring forth again the natural fruit, which natural fruit is good, and the most precious above all other fruit. Wherefore let us go to and labor with our might this last time, for behold, the end draweth nigh, and this is for the last time that I shall prune my vineyard.
Okay, flipping to 59, it says, I'm doing this so that perhaps the roots thereof may take strength, right, and that the good might overcome the evil. So he's going to use the Book of Mormon as a way of showing that these people were preserved by God, showing who they were, showing that God was with them, showing they were part of the chosen people, showing they were part of the house of Israel, right, in a way that they might turn to God. We call the Book of Mormon at times another testament of Jesus Christ, right, so that them seeing that this is a history of their people and that Christ is part of their history would hopefully give some faith that Christ is who he is, right, that they might look to Christ, because most of your Native American, I'll say, religions are not Christian, right? They're not based on Christ. They're based on the Indian gods, right? So the idea that you have Christ to present to them, right? This shows that they came through a way that had Christ in their lives, right? So that's the purpose of this book, is showing them that Christ was in their history, and Christ going to talk to their people. In 61 now, okay, where now it says, wherefore go to and call servants, that we may labor diligently with our might in the vineyard, that we may prepare the way. Okay, that now is going to call servants to begin this work. And now, what do we typically refer to that point in time as? That would be the restoration of the gospel, right? Because now we talked about the coming forth of the Book of Mormon, and it was talking about what this book was going to be and what the value was going to be. It says, now let's call servants and get the plan started. All right, so we believe that, at the time that what we refer to as the restoration of the gospel, which is when the Book of Mormon came forth, that's when servants were called to begin this work, to now have this book in their hand, to now be able to start going and telling the seed of Joseph who they are, to be able to preach that particular story to people. Right? So now he's calling servants to do that. On 62 it says, let us go and labor with our might this last time, for behold, the end draweth nigh. This is the last time that I shall prune my vineyard. All right? And if you remember some chapters ago that we talked about that, this is, the Lord has tried different things to get Israel's attention over the history, right? That this is the last thing, okay? This is the last go-around, and which will end with the gathering of Israel. It will be successful, because prophecy tells us that, but this is the last attempt to now educate Israel and bring them to a faith in Christ. Okay, so that's why this corresponds to the restoration of the gospel. So this is the last time.
Graft in the branches, begin at the last, that they may be first, and that the first may be last, and dig about the trees, both old and young, the first and the last and the first, that all may be nourished once again for the last time. Wherefore dig about them, and prune them, and dung them once more, for the last time, for the end draweth nigh. And if it so be that these last grafts shall grow, and bring forth the natural fruit, then shall ye prepare the way for them, that they may grow. And as they begin to grow, ye shall clear away the branches which bring forth bitter fruit, according to the strength of the good and the size thereof, and ye shall not clear away the bad thereof all at once, lest the roots thereof should be too strong for the graft, and the graft thereof shall perish, and I lose the trees of my vineyard.
You heard the word is last time about 3 or 4 times in those verses, okay? So you understand that part. All right, but now where it says in 63, it says, begin at the last, that they may be first, and the first may be last. Now, usually when we talk about the first, last will be first, we generally refer to the first was Israel, last was Gentiles, right? But now within that, since we're talking about the branches here of Israel, so that I think it's, as Brother Josh said, that the first who received the gospel was the Jews, so now as a result, they'll be last to come in. They'll be the last ones to really believe and accept Christ, right? I mean, as a nation, I mean, obviously individuals, accept Christ, but as a nation, the Jews would be last of the tribes, because it's going to go in reverse now, right? That the other tribes would accept first as a nation, right? So that's the order that it's going to go in. Now, of course, not saying what any of the other orders would be, because we don't know who the last was originally and who's going to be the first one coming back around, but we're just understanding that that's the order that in general that's going to be employed.
For it grieveth me that I should lose the trees of my vineyard. Wherefore ye shall clear away the bad, according as the good shall grow, that the root and the top may be equal in strength, until the good shall overcome the bad, and the bad be hewn down and cast into the fire, that they cumber not the ground of my vineyard. And thus will I sweep away the bad out of my vineyard. And the branches of the natural tree will I graft in again into the natural tree. And the branches of the natural tree will I graft into the natural branches of the tree. And thus will I bring them together again, that they shall bring forth the natural fruit, and they shall be one. And the bad shall be cast away, yea, even out of all the land of my vineyard. For behold, only this once will I prune my vineyard.
The next part of the plan, all right, as it's going through, it says the first shall be last, last shall be first, that the different tribes are going to be gathered in. That when Israel is gathered, all right, that's an occasion or a period of time that the church looks forward to, all right, and that period of time is known as Zion. So that's a period of time that we look forward to as a church when Israel will be gathered, right? But it's not only the gathering of Israel, but it's a time of great righteousness, the time of peace, sometimes referred to as the peaceful reign, right? And it's a time when Christ would appear in the midst, when people would be healed right away, when the devil would have no power over the people, right? So basically any bad would be cast out, and only righteousness would reign there. So that's why when you see here towards the end of what we read, it says here 69, and the bad shall be cast away, even on the land of my vineyard, right? That's what it's referring to. This is the time of Zion, right? So this is the end state of the plan. So it's gathering Israel little by little. It says, but then finally when Israel is gathered, that's the time of Zion, when the bad is cast out, and then the plan is that only good fruit will come forth at that time.
And it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard sent his servant, and the servant went and did as the Lord had commanded him, and brought other servants, and they were few. And the Lord of the vineyard said unto them, Go to, and labor in the vineyard with your might. For behold, this is the last time that I shall nourish my vineyard, for the end is nigh at hand, and the season speedily cometh. And if ye labor with your might with me, ye shall have joy in the fruit which I shall lay up unto myself against the time which will soon come. And it came to pass that the servants did go and labor with their mights, and the Lord of the vineyard labored also with them, and they did obey the commandments of the Lord of the vineyard in all things.
So now in 70 it says that the Lord of the vineyard sent his servant, and the servant went and did as the Lord commanded, and brought other servants, and they were few. Okay, so now what period of time is this talking about? This is the present day, right? That this is the servant of the Lord, which we said was the church and or the ministry, right, is being sent to bring other servants. It says now the numbers will be few, as we certainly can attest to, right? But that's our direction. And it says it says they did as the Lord commanded, right? And they go and labor in the vineyard, or labor throughout the world, as we're doing today, trying to bring other servants into the fold. Right? And now you notice in 71, towards the end, it says, If ye labor with your might with me, you shall have joy in the fruit which I shall lay up unto myself. All right, so that you get to be part of it, because we as the Gentiles, we're not part of the natural tree originally, but yet we get to be part of the whole plan, and we get to enjoy the fruits of the labor because we're helping the Lord to bring this about. Right, that we're part of His family, part of the kingdom, part of the team that's working to bring this about. Right, so it says that this is the present day. Right, so this is what we're doing right now. Is the numbers are few, but we're obeying the commandments of the Lord and bringing this message to the people. Okay, and so as it says in 72, it says the servants did go and labor with their mights, and the Lord of the vineyard labored also with them, and they did obey the commandments of the Lord of the vineyard in all things. All right, so this is the present day. So this is where we are as of today.
And there began to be the natural fruit again in the vineyard, and the natural branches began to grow and thrive exceedingly. And the wild branches began to be plucked off and to be cast away. And they did keep the root and the top thereof equal, according to the strength thereof. And thus they labored with all diligence, according to the commandments of the Lord of the vineyard, even until the bad had been cast away out of the vineyard, and the Lord had preserved unto himself, that the trees had become again the natural fruit. And they became like unto one body, and the fruits were equal, and the Lord of the vineyard had preserved unto himself the natural fruit, which was most precious unto him from the beginning.
Right now, hopefully, as you read this, now again, understanding that what came right before this was the present day, so this is now still an extension of that part. hopefully this would be encouraging to you, right? Because it's showing that the efforts would be successful, right? It says there began to be the natural fruit again in the vineyard, right? The wild branches were plucked off and cast away. All right, what else? The bad had been cast away out of the vineyard. The Lord preserved the natural fruit storage to return. So in other words, that the labors would be successful over time. Right? So that should be encouraging, that we're not doing it for nothing, right? But that what we're doing will at some point bear this kind of fruit that the Lord is seeking.
And it came to pass that when the Lord of the vineyard saw that his fruit was good, and that his vineyard was no more corrupt, he called up his servants and said unto them, Behold, for this last time have we nourished my vineyard, and thou beholdest that I have done according to my will, and I have preserved the natural fruit, that it is good, even like as it was in the beginning. And blessed art thou, for because ye have been diligent in laboring with me in my vineyard, and have kept my commandments, and have brought unto me again the natural fruit, that my vineyard is no more corrupted, and the bad is cast away. Behold, ye shall have joy with me because of the fruit of my vineyard.
It says that now at the end of this work, right, the Lord of the vineyard saw that his fruit was good, the vineyard was no more corrupt. And what time frame would that be? The time of Zion, right? It says the bad has been cast out, right? So now it's just good fruit. It says, but behold, okay, the last time we nourished the vineyard, and the natural fruit is back, and Zion has been established, and and since you helped to build this up, certainly now you have the same joy with me because of the fruit of our vineyard, right? In fact, he says now that you're part of this, and certainly we would be part of Zion, even though Zion is primarily for the gathering of Israel, but the Gentiles are certainly welcome there if they're righteous and part of the family of God. So that we look forward to that, to being part of the kingdom of Zion at that time.
For behold, for a long time will I lay up of the fruit of my vineyard unto mine own self against the season, which speedily cometh. And for the last time have I nourished my vineyard, and pruned it, and dug about it, and dunged it. Wherefore I will lay up unto mine own self of the fruit for a long time, according to that which I have spoken. When the time cometh that evil fruit shall again come into my vineyard, then will I cause the good and the bad to be gathered, and the good will I preserve unto myself, and the bad will I cast away into its own place. And then cometh the season and the end, and my vineyard will I cause to be burned with fire.
First of all, for 76, right, it's talking about the period of time that we refer to as Zion, and notice it's going to be for a long time. Right now we have had different time frames attached to it. Some perhaps up to 1,000 years, or maybe somewhat less than that. But it says, for a long time I will lay up the fruit and be gathering this fruit. So for a long period of time, everything's going to be good, and I look forward to the good fruit for a long period of time. Now in 77 it says, now when the time comes though, I mean anything with time comes to an end at some point. So it says, when the time comes that evil fruit shall come back into the vineyard. So now what period of time is this? Right, that's you might call it the time of judgment, all right, or the last days. Right, some of the things talked about in the book of Revelation, all right. It's towards the end, all right. It says that now Satan is loosed for a season, right? But now the time of judgment comes, and so that, as it says there, it says that the good will I preserve unto myself, the bad will I cast away into its own place, right? And you know where its own place is going to be. It says, and then comes the end, and the vineyard is burned with fire, right? It's at the end the world will be destroyed by fire, then, right? And you have a new heaven, a new earth, and such. So it says that when the time comes, that's the end, and so that's how that story would end. But that's when all the good is gathered into the storehouse, or gathered into heaven, basically. All right. So that's the outlook, right? That's the story. And so as you look at the whole story, right, you can see where it starts out with the story of Israel, right, and it's God's chosen people, and how they're on and off over the years, scatters them, makes a plan to gather them back together, implements that plan, uses the Gentiles as part of the plan, the wild branches, if you will, the wild tree, and causes them to be brought back together at the time of Zion, and that lasts until the last days, the time of judgment.